Okay. Hello. Hello, hello. It looks like my mic is working. Today, we will be talking about video games. Or not video games. Why did I say video game? Today we're going to be talking about uh creature design. And my brain is obviously already scattered. So this will be a fun one. All right, let's game shot. Media source. Having some technical difficulties. Sorry about that. Fix. Transform. Reset transform. Okay. Let's see here. Oop, that's not docked properly. Okay. Now let's see if things are coming through right. Okay. I'm gonna turn that down just a little bit. Okay. If anyone minds, then if the music's okay in the chat, if it's not too loud. Let's see. Let us will begin. All right, so I'm gonna start with something that I actually made a video on yesterday, and it's this. It's the axe armor. Oops, I'm accidentally moving something I'm not intending to move. All right, so the axe armor here, I kind of gave it a cursory go over in a video yesterday, but I'm gonna go a little more in depth with my design ideas and things like that. I'll start with my inspiration and why I wanted to do it, and that's pretty simple. I like Castlevania. I like the classic creatures from Castlevania, and one of the ones that sort of sits as iconic to me is the axe armor, because they're always an early game enemy, and they have boomerang axes, and they teach you need to jump or duck, all that good stuff. So obviously we've got them right here, the boys. I just realized that this is off center. Oh no. There we go. That's better. Let's lock that. So we've got this cool artwork here that's from two different games. One is Symphony of Night, and I think the other is Dawn of Sorrow or Aria of Sorrow. The one on the left. And I like both designs. And they both show that you could have, one that's more of a heavy axer with a big axe, and one that's a little more defensive with a shield. And my base design did go with the shield, just because I wanted a zombie to have some decent defense. But I suppose that also gets slightly ahead of me, because why is it a zombie? Why isn't it a ghost or a construct? Oh, in Castlevania, they've been both. It's not always consistent. Sometimes they're considered to be like a haunted suit of armor. Other times they're a zombie warrior. But they're all pretty mindless, and they serve the greater evil. So obviously this one's pre-master. It still has alignment on it. I made this a while back. And in terms of like how I start designing and stuff, I'm a little chaotic in the matter. Sometimes I start with lore. Sometimes I start with mechanics. I usually start with mechanics. And so I wanted to give them a little more versatility than your average zombie, which I just picked because it felt like the better option for me. So instead of the permanently slowed and can't use reactions like normal zombies, I made an alternate ability called Hindered. And Hindered is basically the same. It's just permanently slowed one, but they can use reactions, because I wanted to give the more martial zombie a more martial capability, especially with its axe throwing special. So let's get to that, because while I can't remember the exact order I did these things in, Returning Blade and Returning Blade and or Twain Throw are two things that I really wanted to have done and reflect the special axe throwing abilities of the axe armor, particularly the fact that it could catch you in the back. So recall or return blade is more your straightforward ability from them. Basically, if they miss with their bonded axe, the axe flies at the triggering strike's target again on its return path, and it gets to make another attack. So it basically means that if it misses its first strike, it can get a second one for the cost of a reaction, provided it was thrown. And this is sort of to give it some action efficiency since it is slowed, where it makes sense. So it could potentially do 3 attacks due to that. Although it's, of course, not terribly likely to hit on that second or third one by comparison. Although this as a boss monster at a really early level would be pretty fun. It'd be really dangerous for level 1s, but for level 2, a minor boss creature or a pair of them as a boss fight would be pretty interesting. We get into the obvious things. How does their axe work? So we have Axe's Bond, and basically it's not dissimilar from things like the Baylor's whip and such, or how I think it's Salamanders, like all of their weapons have flaming on them, but only because they're in their grip. I think Gelugon or Ice Devils have a similar feature. It's basically that it says any axe that they're bonded to gains thrown 10 feet and the brutal weapon traits, and it returns as if it had the returning rune. This is built into this ability so that I could keep the level lower. I did not want to make this creature a high enough level that you could get a weapon with returning off of it as loot. So that's one reason you can bake stuff like that into their stat blocks instead of their items. Speaking of items, I chose Battle Axe for the base one. It fit best. It was a nice all-rounder, so to speak. So they've got that, obviously. Obviously, their axe armors, they're always depicted in this heavy encompassing plate, so they've got full plate. And like I said, I went with the Symphony in the Night one and gave it a steel shield. Though I do mention here in the sidebars that you can use other axes and that there are other zombie warriors with different equipment. And I like these sorts of sidebars in Paizo games or in Paizo books. So, hi Ruskman, how you doing? It's been a while. Sorry if you said that a minute ago. I didn't see it. I need to make my chat bigger, actually, just in general. And then I can make this one smaller so I can see right. There we go. Sorry, lost my train of thought. So with other axes, I said, while most axe armors are created with battle axes as their bonded axe, any axe can fulfill the role. Axe armors with heavy two-handed axes might deal more damage but lack accuracy, and the option to use a shield the reading patterns. Okay. But lack accuracy or the option to use a shield. Those that wield axes made for throwing increase the thrown range increment of their axe by 10 feet, but may deal less damage. And those made with powerful magical axes may be intelligent and lack the hindered ability. Such special axe armors are uncommon and often have the elite adjustment. Specifically speaking about that last option, which was just me leaving the gate open for future axe armors, more specific ones, Obviously, the first two, the ones that use just a heavier axe or use a throwing axe, are just variants on this one. Pretty simple, minor tweaks. Basically, you could have a D10 or D12 axe and deal a little more damage and lower the accuracy, uh, generally by 1 or 2 points. For those of you who may not be terribly familiar, you can just go on Archives of Nethys. They have a building creatures page, which has all the rules for building creatures, and you'll be able to see the common values for this sort of thing there, as well as the guidelines on how to use them. And otherwise, it's pretty simple. It's not too terribly difficult. Basically, for damage, like if you look in the tables, it'll give you a specific amount. But as long as you end up with the same average, which is also shown in parentheses, that's pretty much what you're aiming for. Although you don't want to go too hard on your flat numbers. So like this is 1d8 plus 9, which is pretty steep, but it's to match the normalness of the axe. Normally you would have less of a flat number unless it's really high damage. Basically, if I'm remembering correctly, moderate damage is usually dice plus the average of that dice, of those dice. Although at higher levels, it's bumped up a few points due to keeping up with things like weapon specialization, I think. I give them low perception because zombies tend to have relatively low perception. And we've got ads. So boop doop boop boop boop. We will wait for ads. They're a little break time. All right. Ads should be over now. All right. So, yeah, so they got bad perception because a lot of mindless creatures in general tend to have bad perception, but especially zombies. High in athletics because that's the one thing zombies tend to be good at, or at least mindless zombies. High strength, low dex, befitting of a heavy armor entity. High con, of course, trash intelligence, and Ziltron wisdom and charisma. Pretty standard zombie spread. Reflect similar trends across most mindless zombies. As far as their AC goes, their AC is, I think it's moderate. Let me go just make sure I'm not lying. Let's see, building creatures. Let's see, AC for level 4. Okay, so it's slightly higher than high. This is meant to reflect their heavily armored state. They do have a shield, so they can push it even higher, but it still doesn't quite come to extreme, which, especially at lower levels like this, you want to avoid extreme values outside of really specific circumstances. Or like if you're building an NPC and they have a non-combat level. So usually you'd have skills, maybe hit points and will saves, or other saves, depending, up there generally, but some of their other statistics will be much lower, represented by their creature level. All right, and hit points wise, it's got a really thick stack of hit points for its level. This is just a reflective of zombies in general. They have over high HP, but they have two really common weaknesses: positive damage and slashing damage, or vitality and slashing now. So you're able to cut through them relatively easily with a little know-how really early on. Now, a thing to keep in mind is it does only have 2 actions, and it's not intelligent. So its use of its shield will be limited at best. Like, it's not going to be able to do much damage if it defends itself, because it only has 1 extra action to work with after raising a shield. So, again, really low will because they have no specific wisdom, low reflex because they're low dex, and high fort because they are a relatively high con and they're zombies. They're durable. They're chunky. Ooh, that should be locked. There we go. Of course, they're medium. While big boys, they don't quite class as large. Though there are great armors that in some of the games are huge, but in some of the games just have a really big shield. Which I mentioned that here in other zombie armors, where they have really big swords, or sometimes they have shields. I did add that they sometimes wield elemental magic. That's just for some variety. There are dual wielding ones that are not nearly as clumsy. That was also just me being a bit expansive, although there is the giant dual blade armor. I forget its exact name, but it's a lot faster than the other armors as well. So we've already gone over Axe's Bond. They of course have a fist. This is just because while every creature is considered to have a base attack or fist that's hidden on them, zombies and other brutish creatures often have a dedicated fist attack to better define it against the sort of generic rule of if it's got no more weapons, this is how it fights. Though this does still follow some of those rules, it's still 2 lower than its other attack, but the damage is more explicit here, and it's specifically not non-lethal. So that's another reason to call out having a fist or other specific strike on a creature rather than letting it default to the universal unarmed strike. Embedded axe. So this one I just always thought was something that was cool that they could do. Because in some of the games, or maybe I imagine this, but I thought their axes could get stuck in you. And like while they couldn't actually do anything special with that, it was just, an effect. I thought it would be cool if they could get a axe bone stuck in you basically, and then rip it back out. So they have embed axe, and it hurls its axe. I've got some typos here. I apparently rethought this first sentence and didn't properly fix it. But the axe armor makes a bonded axe strike. It hurls the axe at you, or at a creature. If it hits, the axe embeds itself, dealing damage as normal and dealing 1d6 persistent slashing damage for as long as it remains embedded. If a creature succeeds its recovery check to end the persistent damage, the axe falls to the ground. The embedded creature can use their unarmed attack or athletic skill to escape DC 20, removing the axe on a success. I did it that way specifically because acrobatics didn't really seem to make sense to pull out an axe, whereas both athletics and unarmed did. But there's also just a 25% chance that you can remove it after you take the persistent damage. But recall axe, in addition to basically being like, oh, I'm not holding my axe here, let me be holding my axe, it can recall the axe from an embedded creature, dealing 2d8 slashing damage with a basic fortitude save. It can do this as much as it wants, but it does have to set it up with embed axe. And that does forego the persistent damage, should it be same round, for example. And then Twain Throw. Twain Throw is their sort of quote-unquote breath weapon attack. Their big AoE. So they throw their axe real hard. They throw it horizontally. Buzzsaw style. And it deals 48 slashing damage, basic reflex DC. But while the damage is pulled together for simplicity, it's actually because it's hitting twice. It's technically doing 2d8 both times. So it applies weaknesses and resistances twice. The axe armor can't use it again for d4 rounds. That's pretty standard for, quote, high damage AoEs. So the idea on this one was, it's always really cool, I think, in anime and video games when you have like piercing on a projectile and it just goes wah. But this one also comes back. And I wanted the fact that it would ultimately be hitting twice to be an interesting factor of the attack. So that's why weaknesses and resistances apply twice, which honestly, if this is your enemy, the chances of that mattering much are pretty low. Unless maybe you do one of those special higher level ones with magic or magic weapon. And then it could be a little more effective against the party. But where this comes into play more, I think, is when you eventually are able to summon these things. And if you happen to be going against something that's weak to slashing, then you can double trigger a weakness. Of course, don't use it so much against things that have resistance to physical damage. That would probably not work out as well. So, if anyone in chat has any questions or comments, please go ahead. And for anyone watching this on YouTube, please give me your questions and comments down below. Please and thank you. So I'm gonna move on to the next creature. All right, so here we have something else I made quite a while back. Let's make it a little smaller. All right, there we go. So this is an original creature that I made. It's not from a video game or anything. This art here is by, hold on, I don't want to mess up his name. Does all the ink blot creatures. Kim Diaz Holm. And I took his inkblot scan. I put it on a piece of paper in Blender and rendered it so it looks like this. But he does very cool inkblot artwork and an ink artwork. And it's what partially inspired this creature. So we have dark art. I originally thought it up as a creature family. I have not expanded it. We have this one. But it is what it is. So I like to dive into etymology and stuff sometimes. So that's why I have weird words like Tristopus. The dark arts, sometimes known as triste opus. Dark arts form when an artist driven by feelings of worthlessness throws themselves into their work, failing to care for their own health. This effort fills their work with their drive to achieve something, but is soured for their disregard of self, causing the eventual dark art to rise as a would-be caretaker should their creator survive the process. Dark arts will protect their creator viciously, treating them as the most precious thing, emulating the antithesis of their own formation. However, they do so without true compassion, guarding a corpse or living artist, animated or sustained through its odd magics while trapping them in an effort to keep them safe and healthy. The sad truth is that these misguided constructions often end up causing more harm to their creator than their legacy and aid and recovery. And go with a song that doesn't have words. Okay. So they're sort of like good intentions, bad practice. They're not the most intelligent, but they do have a mind. They're codependent, basically. They're extremely codependent construct. Go ahead and read the things on the right. It's been a while since I've looked at this. From artistry. Dark arts often portray a conveniently horrific or dread-inducing subject based on the artist's predilections and society. However, in societies where the content is considered less severe or even acceptable, they cease attempts to frighten would-be assailants, opting for raw violence to bridge the gap in cultural unease and thematics. And this was brought up because there's some art in the world that people find, like, people locally don't find frightening or concerning at all, and some in, but they will, like strangers, outsiders will, and the opposite is also true. Uh, so art being socially, personally, and uh, culturally significant, what is frightening in art can mean different things in different places and to different people. So when they can't scare you because your art doesn't frighten them, it doesn't give them a sense of unease, they just go for the thing that scares everyone: pain and death. Catharsis. Though rare, some surviving artists are able to destroy or even live fruitfully alongside a dark art of their making. When such an eventuality comes to pass, the artist finds an emotional balance as the negative feelings that created the dark art are shed from their soul, and the art itself, if it remains. This does not prevent future changes to the artist's emotions, being merely a cathartic experience. But a dark art shed of its darkness loses its violent and harmful tendencies, gaining the minion trait and following their creator wherever they go, assisting in what way they can. So that was more of a flavor thing, a thing to help with storytelling. And what if you did get help? What if good came from it? What if you got therapy? Or what if the dark art was actually able to help you achieve something? Or what if you just found the value in yourself again? So that's what the catharsis section is about. Level 1 creature, mortality and ink. This was meant to be the most hi Captain Collateral Damage. Welcome in. We're talking about monster design, creature design, from both outside of mechanical aspects and inside of mechanical aspects. I'm going over some creatures I made quite a while ago. Oh, there's ads. Hello. Waiting for the ads to end. One more minute. "30 seconds. Okay, that should be the ads over. Hello, Captain Collateral Damage. Welcome to this stream. We're talking about creatures, creature design, and from both narrative and mechanical perspectives. I'm going over some creatures that I made quite some time ago to do this. And we're about halfway through the Mortality and Ink here, which is a tiny construct, uncommon, and that uncommon should be a different color, but it's not. C'est la vie. I forget things sometimes. So Perception, it's decent. It's got dark vision. Most constructs do. It doesn't have eyeballs. It just senses. It has some form of sight. It's got common as a language, but of course, realistically, say this dark art belonged to an orc that did not speak common. They were from like an orcish tribe that was cut off from Halden trade or something. They would speak orcish. It just have the languages of its master, realistically, or of its creator. Excuse me. Skills, it flies, so we give it acrobatics. Intimidation, its whole thing is scaring people before choosing violence. And stealth, they can sit around and pretend to be just a piece of art quite easily. I should have actually put a parenthetical here that gave them like a +4 bonus to pretend to be just a piece of art. Or did I give them an ability like that? I did not. Okay. So yeah, that's a thing, sort of like the gargoyle ability, where they get a pretty hefty bonus to pretending to just be a thing. Low strength, high dex. It's a piece of paper. It's not strong. Stronger than you might think, but it's not strong. So, Mortality in Ink has a bond with its creator, regardless of if they are still alive. It will not willingly leave a 100-foot emanation of its creator, pursuing the creator tirelessly if they move further than this range. Mortality in Ink has an innate knowledge of what direction its creator is at all times, as long as they remain on the same plane. While within the emanation, the Mortality in Ink maintains the creature's health, causing them to need no sustenance from food or drink, though their body is merely sustained, and they will still feel hunger and immediately begin starving and suffering from thirst if they leave the emanation if they have not otherwise received sustenance. This was meant to be sort of emblematic of the sort of codependent nature of the Mortality in Ink. People often forget to take care of themselves when they're in obsessive episodes. And so the Mortality in Ink or other dark arts would sustain them. It would keep them going, but not in an actual healthy way, as is their innately flawed nature. It's got an okay AC. At this low level, its AC is pretty low. Part of that's because it does have regeneration. The only way to destroy a dark art is to like rip it up and take it away from its creator. They cannot die for good near their creator. Plain and simple. They don't regenerate quickly, but they do regenerate. They've got the standard array of immunities for construct. It should have vitality and void on there. I think I made this in the interim when we only had a sneak peek of the remaster. So it doesn't have vitality or void on there, but it should. And it is weak to fire because it's paper. Regenerative parchment. This is just better explaining the regeneration. So as long as it's within, or as long as it's got regeneration, it's not destroyed at 0 hit points. This is because of a technicality in the system, where constructs and undead are both considered to be completely and utterly destroyed at 0 hit points, and they need an ability that says that they are not destroyed at 0 hit points if they have regeneration. Now, there's a lot of design philosophies that say, well, it's got regeneration, the point of that is to keep it from dying outside of specific circumstances. So, of course, that's just obvious. but I prefer to design to the technicalities of the system. So one could argue that if I didn't put this in, that the regeneration is basically just fast healing with a disable. Whereas fast healing doesn't usually have quick and easy rules for disabling it. You need an ability for that anyway. So you would put a regeneration on there with its disabled entry. Because regeneration already has sub rules. Like, it's in the regeneration ability entry about stuff disabling it, but fast healing does not. So that's why if you see fast healing or regeneration on an undead or a construct, and if it doesn't say anything about it not being destroyed at 0, it's either an oversight or it's meant to be destroyed at 0, and the regen is purpose crafted to have a disabling, or to have a way to disable it, as opposed to fast healing. So very slow on a surface. It's a piece of paper, but it floats through the air a lot faster. Fly 20 feet. It's still overall slow. Its melee is an edge. It's gonna, 1, the artwork is edgy. 2, it's gonna give you a paper cut. Very simple. Surprisingly deadly, much like a throne playing card. And it has a ranged attack. It has the Anguished Cry, which is auditory, emotion, and mental, with a total range of 30 feet, and deals a d8 of mental damage. And this is its sort of, it just wails at you, and it hurts your head. Fills you with a sense of dread and anguish. And I added creatures with bonuses to saves against emotion effects. Apply those bonuses to AC against this attack, which I think is just sensible, because normally there aren't attacks with the emotion trait. So it's a little bit of a caveat to carry through, so that somebody who does have a save bonus against emotion effects doesn't feel kind of cheated by this ability. And it doesn't really hurt to not have it, like having special armor for emotional attacks. And then Dreadful Ink. This is its sort of big ability. It unveils the dark emotions trapped within its artistry, breaking the spirit of those who view it. Creatures in a 30-foot emanation must attempt a DC 17 will save. Regardless of the result, they're immune for 24 hours. Basically, it's basically the fear spell. But with a slight tweak in that it slows you on a critical failure. So this thing floats around. It's mostly meant to be a sort of an add in a combat, or perhaps a difficulty in reaching someone. However, because of Bound Creator, they could also be very plot relevant. Say someone goes missing and you go to search their place, and there's just this flapping piece of paper that just whizzes out the doorway the moment you open it. And it's very obvious it's not a normal piece of paper. And so you're looking for this missing person, you pursue the strange piece of paper. And if somebody's able to identify it, they might know that they are probably on the trail of the person they're looking for. That sort of thing. So that is the Mortality in Ink. If anyone in chat has any questions or comments, please hit me with them. And if you are watching this on YouTube, please hit me with your questions and comments. Thank you. Now we'll be moving on to the next creature. I'm sure people know who this is. Ooh, too big. So now we have Charmander, obviously, property of Game Freak, Pokemon Company, Nintendo, all that. So we have Charmander. There was a point in time when I was making an entire Pokédex full of Pokemon, and there will be some, I guess, artifact of that in this. But pretty simply, I just went with one of the Pokédex entries for the sidebar. Went with a newer and more classic artwork that I picked up online. Obviously, those are the things that belong to those companies. And so they can't speak. They say Charmander Char, but they do understand common. And that's just to sort of facilitate the whole, well, I tell the Pokemon things and they seem to understand. Starts out level -1. This is the baby. And I tried to give them sensible skills for being both their least version as well as what seemed to suit them. So, acrobatics, intimidation, and stealth. It is a tiny creature. And you'll notice -2 circumstance in areas of darkness. See Torch Tail. And I gave them a pretty basic array. -3 is pretty standard for beasts. On intelligence, +2 on wisdom, +3 on charisma, +0 on con because it's a baby, +2 in strength because it's a hitter, +2 in dex because it's small and quick. The Torch Tail has the Firelight and Primal traits. Charmander's tail is perpetually aflame, a function necessary to its bodily function. Alliteration. I need to get better about that. Charmander sheds bright light in a 20-foot radius and dim light another 20 feet, basically a torch. Charmander can hide its tail light, but unless the light is fully suppressed, such as by a darkness spell, it imposes a -2 circumstance spell check. It's a friend. -2 circumstance penalty. The stealth checks while in an area that would be dark without the Charmander's tail. When Charmander is unconscious, its tail flame weakens, shedding half as much light and dim light. So if it's knocked out or asleep, it sheds less light. A survival mechanism, surely. AC of 14, 2 fortitude, 5 reflex, 5 will. Pretty well balanced weak fort. For a level -1. 7 hit points, also fairly standard for level 1. It's resistant to cold and fire and has a weakness to bludgeoning. This is something that I now question. This was before Rage of Elements came out. So we didn't have so many things with actual elemental traits attached to their damage. So the idea here was that it was resistant to cold because it's strong against ice, resistance to fire because it is a fire type, and then I think it's ground and rock and water all dealt bludgeoning damage, so on pretty much everything. So it had weakness to bludgeoning. And then water weakness. Charmander takes 1 additional damage from spells and effects with the water trait. The effect does not deal damage, but sufficiently douses the Charmander, such as a bucket of water over it. It takes 1d6 damage instead of 1 additional damage. Similarly, it takes 2d4 if it becomes fully submerged. and rain does not affect it. This was based off, I think, a fire elemental of some kind. I do forget expressly, but that's where the bulk of it goes. And it's got a little bite, and it can whack you with its tail for some fire damage. And this is where the sort of weirdness that I got into for stronger Pokemon. And basically, I say, hey, go look at the building creature rules to adjust most of the statistics. But this is what you get if you want to increase the level of your Charmander. So when it becomes level 1, we just skip level 0. When it becomes level 1, it can cast Produce Flame as a primal innate spell. Has a high spell attack and spell DC for its level. And that goes back to the building creatures rules. So you can just look in the table, look down high, and go pick those numbers for whatever level it happens to be. A level 2 Charmander can cast Burning Hands as a primal innate spell once per day, heightening this to a spell level equal to half its level rounded up. And level 3, it can cast Ash Cloud as a primal innate spell once per day. So it gets Ember, Flamethrower, and Smokescreen, basically. There was an impulse to sort of give it to them more often, but then it didn't feel quite right. Like, I would have to down tune what spells they could have when. So at even higher levels, you can give them more of these a day, basically, would be the idea. Although at a certain point, it would also evolve into Charmeleon. And then I would have a Charmeleon block, and then that would upgrade, and then it'd have a Charizard block. And I actually have that Pokédex around somewhere on the internet as well. If I find it, I'll throw it in the YouTube video description. So if anyone has any comments or questions, please feel free to ask them down below. Peace. Okay, now we have the Diplocephalus. You might not recognize that name, or you might. You might recognize this picture from Symphony of the Night. We're back on Castlevania, baby. All right. So, I did a little research on the Diplocephalus, both from the Castlevania wiki, as well as just in general. So that's where some of the lore here is going to come from. Some of it I made up, some of it's based off of that. And I'm not going to lie, I don't quite remember which parts are which. Well, let's get started. Diplocephalus. An enormous eyeless lizard lumbers carefully forth, sniffing the ground, patches of long hair dangling from its body, dragging along. It seems to be searching for something to consume with its gigantine maw and plodding movement. The tail reaches up, tipped with the upper body of a humanoid figure clad in silk and gold with matching hair to the lizard upon its head. Their eyes are cold, and its vacant gaze leaves an unsettling pit in one's stomach. These scavenging monstrosities seek carrion left behind by other servants of darkness, as while it is powerful, it lacks the predatory facilities to hunt efficiently. The humanoid tail is more of a keen killer, but lacks the taste for flesh that the lizard does. And their limited empathic Their limited empathic communication with one another makes them a dangerous team, but limited in their capacity for destruction. Of two exceedingly different minds, each driven by their own goals, which they can only hope push the other forward. Yeah, they're a weird, complicated creature that is literally two in one. They're not this head doesn't control this head. This head doesn't control this head. They are more like Etten, where they're sort of like two in one body, two beings in one body. We'll go over the sidebar next. Origins. It is unclear where diplocephali hail from. I hope that's the right pluralization. But they are not of this world. It is rumored that the conflagration that consumes their body on death is them being dragged directly to hell as some sort of punishment for sins or deals cast eons ago, or some grudge held by the denizens of hell. Dull cunning. While most diplocephali are not particularly bright, they are not without their moments of insight, especially when it comes to the little tells of mortal fears. Self-serving more than statist. Oh, this is going to be a great video. Self-serving more than sadistic, a cunning humanoid half of the Diplocephalus might bargain, threaten, or otherwise broker peaceful interactions with would-be threats. The lizard half of them acting more as an imposing guard dog than a diplomatic partner. Rarely, such Diplocephalus might find themselves being gifted fineries and Epicurean delights to the humanoid half, and bountiful flesh to the lizard half, in trade for their brutal abilities or insight to the fears of their enemies. So, they're kind of keen, they're shrewd, and they're not too impulsive. They are self-serving, and they do have influence over each other, even if they don't control each other. Let's take a look. Again, this is pre-remaster, so we've got an alignment of neutral evil. It's large, mostly because of the Diplocephalus. It's an aberration and a fiend, because we can mix those things together in Pathfinder 2e. And I gotta say, that's the thing I really love, is being able to have multiple creature types on a creature, which was something that was exceedingly rare in Pathfinder 1st edition. And required special abilities. It's got perception of 9 and scent. So it's the lizard head that can smell things, basically. And they're not the best perceivers overall. We have Aklo and one other language common to its scavenging grounds. So Aklo is their sort of native tongue, and it's able to communicate with locals, so to speak. It's got a high athletics because of its mostly physically enforcing body, a high intimidation, and the human head mainly has religion. Survival is good for tracking, which is what the lizard scrounges around and looks for. So we start with the two-headed ability. The Diplocephalus has two heads, each of which rolls its own initiative and has its own turn. Neither head can delay. At the start of the head's turn, the head gains 2 actions and 1 reaction. The lizard head controls the lower body, allowing it to move and make the jaws and foot attacks, but is blind and cannot speak or cast spells. The humanoid head controls a tail, can see, cast spells, and speak, but can only make strikes with weapons it may wield or that would sever or with its fists, and cannot take actions to move, such as stride or step. Any ability that would sever either head, such as the Vorpal weapon property, causes the Diplocephalus the Diplocephalus to... Oh no. Okay. So this happens too sometimes. Sometimes you accidentally delete something or forget to put it in. I think here it's an accidental delete, but it's the same as the Etten ability. So it doesn't cause them to die if it still has the other head, but it does lose the turn's actions and reactions of the severed head. and mental effects that target a single creature affect only one of its heads. But I think because there's a difference here, I did want them to die if you severed either head. So I think that's the difference here that I started making and then did not finish. So if you cut off either head, they die. They're not like an Etten in that regard. Born blind. The Diplocephalus's lizard head is blind. However, it does not treat normal terrain as difficult terrain due to this, does not suffer a -4 penalty to its perception checks, and is not flat-footed to hidden creatures unless they would be flat-footed by another means such as flanking. Though, as the lizard is more of a scavenger, it must still attempt a flat check to target hidden creatures. This is just basic, it's blind fight, but specific to the lizard head. And down-tuned a little bit, it does still have to roll to hit. It's got, I think, a moderate AC. Let's see here. Yep, it has a moderate AC, good fort, bad reflex, decent will. So basically, most of its body is the lizard, which is a chungus, a strong, resilient body. And the mental, the human part has a stronger mind, so it's got a decent will save, but it's kind of bulky and slow, so poor reflex save. Hit points, we're looking at being between moderate and low, but it does have physical resistance 3 except against magical. So by level 2 or 3, you have a way to overcome this, but it makes it a threatening creature early on. It's also weak to fire and good damage, which would be fire and holy in the remaster. Burning Focus requires concentrate, and the trigger is the humanoid head would end a fire spell due to not sustaining a spell. The humanoid head draws on the untapped potential of the lizard's mind. It sustains the triggering spell. This reaction is used by the humanoid head. And that's just some action efficiency in there. It gets to sustain, I think it's got one spell that it can sustain. Yeah, Flaming Sphere. That's literally what it's there for, is Flaming Sphere. Conflagration. When the Diplocephalus dies, it catches fire and rapidly burns to ash with agonized screams. The intense heat deals 3d6 fire damage to creatures in a 5-foot emanation. Basic reflex, DC 18. This is because if you kill them in the game, they catch on fire and burn real hot, real fast. And this is a pretty standard on-death effect. Urging Adjustment, that should be bolded, is a concentrate action. Is the humanoid head begins its turn. Effect. The lizard head senses the humanoid head's desire to move, allowing it to step or stride. This reaction is taken by the lizard head. So they each have their reactions, and this is what they're mainly for. So the lizard can react to step or stride at the beginning of the other head's turn, giving it some limited option for movement. It's relatively slow, with a speed of 20 feet, has good damage and grab. So it gets to attempt a grapple check after hitting with no map. Back in the days when this was written, it would just automatically grab you for an action. But because it's limited to 2 actions, that would be its whole turn. So that's another reason, like, you can put grab on a level 3 creature, is if it's got more limited actions, that is something it might not be able to do nearly as often as a creature with 3 actions. So it's also got its foot strike, which is agile, so it makes for a good secondary attack. And the fist strike belongs to the human half. And it's much weaker because their strength comes from here, the divine innate spells. They got Flaming Sphere, Burning Hands times 3, Charm, Dancing Lights, and Produce Flame. Of course, that would be Ignition and Breathe Fire now. I think Burning Sphere or Flaming Sphere has a different name now too. And Lights would just be Light now because those two spells got combined. Stomp and Tear is a 2-action, which requires it to be the Lizard Head's turn. And it strides or steps, then makes a foot strike and a jaw strike. A little action efficiency there. It prevents it from being able to grab, but it does let it facilitate roughly 3 actions for its turn. So if anyone in chat has any questions or comments, please let me know. And if you are watching this on YouTube and you have any comments or questions, please put them in the comments down below. What do you think of the Diplocephalus? Before we switch to the next creature, we're gonna take a short little break so I can go get a drink. I'll be right back. She was kind of mad at that. Immediately pleasantries were canceled when she asked who was paying for these flowers I trampled. I laughed and said, yo, I replaced them. I just did a job that I'm waiting to get paid from. I'm an ex-soldier fighting for freedom, providing my services to anyone who need them. So she came with a plan, suggested I protect her, cause them bad folks out there are trying to get her. And before I could ask why, troopers just passed by, kicked in the church door, I heard the wooden glass fly. Should I help her? My conscience said you got a dog. So I went from a soldier to a bodyguard. Soldier code is the law that we live by. Day by day I wonder why my shorty had to die. I reminisce over her just about every day. Give it up for the A. Soldier code is the law that we live by. Day by day I wonder why my shorty had to die. I reminisce over her just about every day. Give it up for my A. So in our travels and the chapters after that, everywhere we went, somebody was trying to capture that. So I asked her that, yo, what's the deal? Why is everybody wanting you killed? Turns out she was the last descendant of the ancients who may just hold the key to something sacred, known as the promised land. So this caused a lot of problems, man. Everybody wanted it, so they devised the plan. And if that wasn't enough, then here comes Sephiroth, the meanest and baddest, biggest boss of them all. She goes to the church, pray for the solution, but Sephiroth appears from the air without a care. He draws a sword, takes a life with a slice, no last rites. I'll never forget that. Okay. I'm back, and we are going to go to the bomber armor. We did the axe armor earlier, and here's its cousin. So I did make this one later. Obviously it doesn't have an alignment. This is from early remaster, maybe previews of remaster design. So it might not be the best laid out, but I think I've got most of it. So bomber armor. Similar to axe armors, bomber armors are heavily armored zombies animated with a particular bonded weapon. Where they diverge, however, is their weapon is a bomb, or rather a small cluster of them, which magically duplicate themselves for their wielder. Rereading these, I realize I forget to put words sometimes. This is why second passes are important, people. A second set of eyes, even. And we'll get into other bombs later. I want to get into some of their abilities first. So they're medium, just like the others. Undead, mindless zombie. Again, you could have non-mindless versions. And let's see, they've got a pretty average perception. and dark vision. So honestly, a little bit better than your average zombie because most zombies have poor perception. They have the hindered ability again, like I had on the axe armors, which makes them permanently slowed 1, but they can use reaction. And for their items, they have their bonded bomb. 4 times functions as alchemist fire, although it could be other bombs. And fortress plate, because fortress plate had come out and I really liked it. But this is like, if you slay it, you'll get 4 of their bombs because they disenchant and just become normal bombs of their variety. Provided, you know, they don't detonate. So we've got let's see. We've got high AC. These ones don't have a shield. So actually on the axe armor, I might lower the AC a little because it does have a shield. Adds. Well, time for another little break because of the ads. See you in a minute and a half. All right, we're back. So they have pretty standard AC and good fort, like no zombies, pretty bad will, and they have meh reflex, except because they're basically in bomb armor. They have a plus 18 anti-damaging area effect. So they'll fall down a hole. They'll trip. They'll do all that. They are disarmable. They are trippable. But your fireball ain't gonna do a whole lot to them. Not as often anyway. So, like most zombies, lots of HP. They've got a resistance to area damage 5, which is basically the opposite of swarms. They have resistance to fire and to splashdown. They have weaknesses to slashing and vitality equal to 10, so they're still quick to mow down, even with their high hit points, if you have the right damage types. And slashing's incredibly easy to come across. So they have bomb spike. The bomber armor's hands are faster than their feet. They do not trigger reactions by making thrown strikes with bombs. Normally, if you throw a bomb, it does provoke an attack of opportunity, if I'm not mistaken, or a reactive strike now, because it's a ranged attack. But with bomb spike, they can just spike it at their feet, and it does not provoke. They have drop the bomb. When the bomber armor is destroyed, it drops its bonded bomb, which detonates before splitting into the original bombs used to create the bomber armor, and dealing 2d6 fire damage and a 5-foot emanation, DC 25 basic reflex save. Creatures that fail their save also they take 2 persistent fire damage or 4 persistent fire damage on a critical failure. So that's they've got a on death or on destruction little blast as well, which is true of the original creature in Castlevania. They stand there and they go, ugh, and they drop their bomb and it explodes, and if you're standing too close, it hurts you. Or if it doesn't hurt you, it should. Handheld detonation is a reaction, as the bomber armor takes physical damage, even if it is reduced to 0. They detonate the bomb that they're holding in their hand, dealing 2d8 fire damage with a reflex save to all other creatures in a 5-foot emanation. So this is to sort of insinuate that you want to attack them at a reach or at range, because they will punish you standing next to them. If they die next to you, boom. If you whack them next to you, boom. It's not insane damage or anything. It's pretty low for a level 7 creature, but it is pretty consistent. It will have one of these reactions every round. So, and its bombs just reform. So it's not like it has to draw them. Now you might think, oh, well, we can disarm them. Not unlike the axe armor, there is a recall bomb ability, but if you disarm them for that little bit, they can't use anything that's, not in their hands. So in theory, even though I didn't put up requirements and stuff, the sense would dictate that if you disarm the bomb armor and destroy it, then it doesn't drop the bomb and explode. But I'm getting ahead of myself. They're slow. They're a zombie. Speed 20 feet. They only have or their main attack is a ranged bonded bomb. And it's alchemical bomb fire, magical splash, thrown 20 feet. Deals 2d8 plus 4 fire, plus 2 persistent fire, and 2 fire splash damage. So that's pretty much just following along with how bombs work. It is effectively an alchemist's fire with some pumped up damage. And then they have a fist that is a lower attack value. And lower damage, it's their backup. It's not their main, but it is effective. Agile, finesse, unarmed, which I did leave unarmed off of the other one, which was probably a mistake. But both of them, they're not non-lethal. These are very lethal, punchy fists. And the bomber's bond. The bomber armor's bonded bomb never seems to run out, duplicating as needed. Regardless of what kind of bomb is bonded to, it automatically reforms in the bomber armor's hand after being thrown. So, recall bomb, magical manipulate teleportation, the bomber armor's bonded bomb. Say that 5 times fast, Sean. The bomber armor's bonded bomb is not in its grasp and is on the same plane of existence. In fact, the bomber armor reforms its bonded bomb in its grasp, calling it from wherever it may be. So I knocked the bomb out of its hand, I disarmed it. We're good to attack it, and then next turn it goes, nope. And then salvo, should it have both of its actions. This bomber armor is holding its bonded bomb. The bomber armor hurls a cluster of self-duplicating bombs that explode, it's supposed to be that explode, into a 10-foot burst centered within 60 feet, dealing 5d8 fire damage to all creatures in the area. DC 25 basic reflex. Creatures that fail their save take 5 persistent fire damage, or double that on a critical failure. It can't use salvo again for 1d6 rounds. This is based more closely to the Drake breaths. Because you'll see all across creatures in Pathfinder 2nd edition that sometimes there's a D4, sometimes there's a D6. I'm not gonna lie, I don't really know why there's a difference most of the time, but it's there. And bursts seem to have it more often on a D6. And this is pretty similar to like a Flame Drake's Breath. It's just reflavored as bombs. So pretty straightforward. It's a bomby guy. Throws things, they go boom. So other bombs. While most bomber armors are created with alchemist fires as their bonded bomb, any bomb can fulfill the role. I'm going to say bomb a lot. If you choose a different bomb, damage with their bonded bomb attack, handheld detonation, drop the bomb, and salvo deal the type of damage normally dealt by the chosen bomb, also replacing alchemist fire and items. You can use the special effects of that bomb, such as the off-guard condition of bottled lightning, in place of the persistent damage on strikes, using the same save DC as drop the bomb if necessary. Additionally, it replaces its resistance to fire with the primary damage dealt by its bomb. So if you use bottled lightning, it would have resistance to electricity instead of fire. Bomber armors that use uncommon or even rare bombs have the same rarity as the bombs needed to make them. Similarly, non-mindless bomber armors are uncommon and often have the elite template applied. That should be elite adjustment, not template. Have higher mental ability modifiers, more skills, and may lack the hindered ability. As most zombies that are intelligent do not have the slow ability. So, if anyone in chat has any questions or comments, please let me know. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please let me know your comments or questions down in the comment section below. Be right back. All right, I'm back. So we'll do one more, and we are going to look at, let's see. We'll look at the creature we made yesterday. And go over its design philosophy a little bit more. So here we have the Ruined Guardian from Genshin Impact. Obviously, Mihoyo owns the artwork, all that. Alright, so Ruined Guardians. Created by a lost civilization, these hulking machines wander the land, their purpose long forgotten, and their function leading to strife wherever they may roam. They're large, mindless constructs. They have okay perception, nothing crazy. I wanted them to be level 4, partially because my home game that I run with my wife is set in Tevat, and so I was just reflavoring other monsters as Ruined Guardians, and I wanted to have an actual one. So that's why I did this one. Very good at athletics. Most mindless creatures have one, maybe two skills, and it's usually athletics and stealth. So we got high strength, relatively poor dex, a decent con, absolutely no intelligence, flat wisdom, and absolute trash charisma. This is a thing that honestly kind of is hit or miss with me, is tanking charisma for mindless creatures. I personally, I do it because of precedent, but I think it should usually just be 0. Like, and sometimes it is. Like, zombies have 0 charisma, not -5, but most constructs have -5 charisma when they're mindless, which doesn't make as much sense to me, because that's also running your ability to intimidate, and this is a big nasty machine. Why can't it be at least a little scary? But it is what it is. Sometimes I just go by precedent because it's easy. But anyway, it's got a good AC, if I'm remembering correctly. It's 1 point above high and probably 3 points below extreme. Got good fortitude, okay reflex, terrible will, but it's also immune to mental effects. So will being absolute trash is only going to come up now and then. It's got high HP, just barely. Has all the construct immunities: bleed, death effects, disease, doom, drain, fatigue, healing, mental, non-lethal attacks, paralyzed, poison, sicken, unconscious, vitality, and void. It has resistance 5 to physical, which is on the lower end for a level 4 creature. I believe their resistances start at 4 and go up to 7. Physical 5 except adamantine. Chances of you having adamantine at level 4 are not 0, but it's slim, and you'd be beating them with a rock most likely. But 1d4 plus strength rock might outdo, your dagger or something if you're a weaker character or a smaller weapon character. Weak point. This is because you can shoot them in the eye in the game, and I like the idea that some creatures just do have weak points. I was originally going to go with construct armor to facilitate this effect. Construct, for those of you who don't know, construct armor is basically like, hey, this creature's AC is high. It's like really high for its level. But if you critically hit it, or you get down to half hit points, its AC goes down. Permanently, basically. And I ended up not wanting to do that because it didn't really fit. Like, sure, it's a easy mechanical inference to make, but I preferred to go for the actual effects of its weak point. So Ruined Guardians bear a particular weak point at their eye. When a Ruined Guardian is critically hit by a ranged attack or other attack that could reach its eye at GM discretion, it takes an additional 5 damage and staggers, becoming slowed 1 for 1 round and is off guard for as long as it is slowed. That's just to say that its eye, if you hit it properly, does not have resistance 5, basically. That's what the additional 5 points is. And I did originally, I was going to put in where it's like, oh, if it's already slowed and you hit it again, it becomes stunned for 1 round. Because that's what happens in Genshin. But I had to pull myself back because I have a tendency to overcomplicate things or go too deep. And that was one of those moments where it's just like, this would make it match much better, but it's unnecessarily complicated and can completely just disable this thing, especially when it's already going to have its AC lowered. So you just get to slow it by hitting its weak point. It's a rider on pretty much every critical hit for reach and ranged weapons. Or if you climb up on it, you stab it in the face. I personally allow people to try and climb up enemies. Or like if it's tripped and you're just there. So it's good. It has a pretty standard speed of 25 feet. I feel like they're kind of slow for their size, but they're not really slow. So they can match a human and a standard person in speed. They've got kind of a low to hit, but they have really high damage. They're brutes. They're not very controlled for the most part. They're very heavy hitters, but they're slow. They project. I forget the term, but you can predict their moves pretty good. It does have a missile attack, as the Guardians do have missiles. Concussive, range increment 30 feet, reload 1. And this is just because they're singular missiles. I feel like should not be a great alternative to them running up and hitting you. But they do have a, I'm gonna shoot all my missiles thing going on. So we start with slamming leap. Using its weight to its advantage, the Ruined Guardian leaps and slams both fists down, crushing a 5-foot burst centered within 5 feet of the Ruined Guardian, dealing 2d10 bludgeoning damage. Basic reflex save, DC 21. The creatures that critically fail the save are knocked prone. So for those of you who don't know, these things tend to have a 3-hit combo. They swing with one fist, swing with the other, and then they leap and slam. And so, I mean, your swings are just the melee fist, and then slamming leap is its own singular attack. I put flourish on it so that it can only use it once per round, otherwise it would just be silly. And it makes for a good third hit because it doesn't use map. So this is encouraged to be the quote-unquote last attack of a combo. It has push. I decided to put push in there because this was the first one, or the first creature I've made like this since the new push was made and showed off. And it ended up not needing to be removed because the space setting ended up okay. So push, if it hits you with its fist, it can spend an action to attempt to shove you with no map, or multiple attack penalty. The Unrelenting Salvo is its big missile launch. The Ruined Guardian locks itself to the ground, immobilizing itself until the beginning of its next turn. It unleashes a salvo of explosive missiles, dealing 5d6 fire damage in a 15-foot burst within 60 feet. Basic reflex save, DC 21. The Ruined Guardian cannot use Unrelenting Salvo again for 1d4 rounds. This is its quote-unquote breath weapon. It's a big, nasty burst, but not crazy big. I didn't want it to be too small either, so I didn't want to go for 20. I didn't want to go for 10. Got the difference, 15. And they're not crazy damaging for the level. Pretty standard amount. And it goes up to the second range increment, effectively, of the singular missiles. And now we have the big 3-action ability. Those of you who have fought these things may be very familiar with the fact that they will just start spinning and spinning like a top and whack you into the air and juggle you for a little while. I removed the juggling aspect, but the Ruined Guardian's torso begins to spin freely, whipping its arms around as it moves. It strides up to its speed and strikes all creatures adjacent to it during this movement. It may target the same creature only once and may push creatures that it hits. So if it hits you, it gets to push you out of the way if you would be in the way. Or attempt to, at least. That was my attempt at it's juggling, but not really. It's not like doing multiple points of damage. and this movement is not impeded by medium or smaller creatures. And if it ends its movement sharing a space with a medium or smaller creature, that creature moves to the nearest unoccupied space. This is forced movement that is not pushing or pulling. The reason for that last statement is there's a lot of confusion for people because of the way that forced movement is laid out. In my opinion, because I've learned to have to say that this is an opinion, most of forced movement is pushing and pulling. Not all of it by a long shot, but if there is, basically, if there's agency being overridden versus a physical force exerting on you, or a force of some kind exerting on you, that's the difference between push and pull and non-push and pull. So this is you scrambling out of the way, not them knocking you out of the way. It is forced movement because you're sharing a space, and normally the GM decides, who moves where if you end up sharing a space, but it doesn't hurt to point out so that they don't have to go look it up if they're not familiar with this sort of situation. And obviously it is only for medium and smaller creatures. If you've got a large creature, it has to move them out of the way to continue. And it's also not a friendly attack. It will hit all creatures, including quote unquote allies. But I thought it was sensible. I thought it was a good way to handle them doing their spinny top. But let me know in the comments what you think. Or if you have any questions. And with that, we're going to go ahead and start wrapping up the stream. And we're going to find someone to raid. Appreciate everyone who came and watched. We are going to raid. Let's see. We're gonna go ahead and raid Arcane Mark Seifter, ISO employee and one of the major game designers for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. All right, time to raid. Have fun, everyone.